Hi, my name's Luca, and recently I purchased the Nikon Z6ii as an upgrade from my Nikon D750. And I decided to take my Z6ii along with my Tamron 100-400, the kit 24-70 f4, and my 50 1.8 to a in-state vacation around an hour away to the Eastern Shore of Virginia to just explore the town and shoot mainly wildlife as well as some portraits. Now, I originally purchased the Nikon D750 around 2 or 3 years ago, right after I shot my first wedding, because I realized I really did need a full-frame sensor, I needed dual card slots, and some more reliable autofocus than the Sony a6300 that I was currently using at the time. And to be honest, for my still photography needs, the D750 kind of did everything I needed it to. No, the autofocus points didn't go all the way to the edges of the frame, but for most of my professional work, I didn't really have any issue focus and recomposing. And for my action and wildlife stuff, the D750 really just got the job done. But the D750 completely sucks in the video department. It could record up to 1080 60 FPS. It had unusable autofocus, and the image quality was never something I was really pleased by. There was no in-body image stabilization, and I could just list a bunch of other reasons, but I think we all know that older Nikon DSLRs just are not really video cameras. So as 2021 is rolling around and hopefully events start to exist again, because I am an event photographer, that's a big source of my photography related income, I wanted to go into the new year with a camera that could do it both, that could do both stills and both video, but I wanted a camera that could also keep up with high action photography, because I do work in sports photography and I also just love wildlife photography. That's like my biggest passion. And after doing a lot of research, it just made the most sense for me to buy the Z6ii. So in this video, I'm going to show you some of the photos and images that I took while I was in the Eastern Shore and just kind of talk about my initial impressions with the camera. So we first went to a kind of rustic barn area right at noon, so the lighting wasn't really great, but I was able to test out animal eye autofocus on this barn cat, and I was actually kind of impressed by this feature. I don't see it being useful in any real wildlife shooting situations, but it was able to track the cat's eye pretty well, and I got some in-focus shots, but I mean, my shutter speed wasn't very high, so they're not perfectly sharp, but the camera did acquire focus properly. Then I decided to take a stroll in the nearby woods, and because it was noon, I just tried to find any animals in the shade, and we were only here for a couple of minutes, but I was able to find some birds flying around in the trees above, and using my Tamron 100-400 lens adapted with the FTZ adapter, I used single point autofocus, and it didn't really have a problem locking on to my subjects once I was able to position the autofocus point between all the leaves and the brush that was in between me and my subject. That was kind of my main takeaway, that if I used the Z6ii like I used my D750, just taking a single point, maybe using some of the wider AF modes, and positioning them where I needed them to be, this camera did not really struggle in the autofocus department. We actually found a deer skeleton, and that allowed me to see some of the close focus capabilities of the 24-70 f4 kit lens, and I did really enjoy using this lens. The travel extending zoom thing was kind of annoying, but the image quality and the close focus capabilities, it was all something I was pretty impressed by. But to be honest, I don't have a use for 24-70 f4. I have a Tamron 24-70 f2.8 G2, and I just can't see myself picking the f4 lens over the 2.8 in almost any situation. Maybe if I was going out to do some travel photography, but I don't know if I can justify really keeping this lens, so that's probably something I'm going to return. But if you don't need the low light capabilities, this is an amazing 24-70 zoom. It's really sharp, it's light, it's portable, and it's overall a pleasure to use if you don't need the 2.8. And taking pictures of this dog here, Animal Eye AF worked even better than it did on the cat, probably because the dog's hair is blonde with the black eyes, just a little bit more contrast. Again, it wasn't a foolproof way to track the eye, but it worked pretty well, and I got the in-focus shots I needed. Again, this is just first impressions of the camera, not a scientific review of all of its new features. Next, we went walking on the beach in Cape Charles, and I got the opportunity to shoot a couple of shorebirds here. And again, using single-point autofocus had no problems. Even with the adapted Tamron lens, I was able to put them on my subject, hit the autofocus button, and I was able to acquire the sharp shots that I needed. And I will say, having the ability to flip out my screen and use autofocus in live view seamlessly how I would use autofocus through the viewfinder is, well, the main reason I kind of perched mirrorless cameras besides its video features, and is something that made shooting these wildlife images significantly easier. Holding it by the lens, flipping the screen out, I was able to get to eye level for all of these subjects, and that was huge. I could not have gotten these shots in the way that I got them with my D750. The live view autofocus is slow, it's unreliable, it kind of sucks. But stationary shots of wildlife doesn't really test a camera's autofocus capabilities whatsoever, so I wanted to capture some pictures of these birds in flight. And here's kind of where I wish I had the new R6 or the Sony's perfect autofocus area tracking, because there were some shots I missed because I was in single shot. I had my focus point over my subject, but then the subject immediately flew away. But I didn't have the wherewithal and the knowledge to perfectly switch autofocus modes to the correct mode and track onto my subject. But instead, if I was just using auto area all the time and that was reliable, I probably would have gotten more in-focus shots. However, once I did have the chance to switch to the proper autofocus modes, I used D9 for these images, I got the sharp shots that I wanted to get. There were some times where the autofocus missed during mainly the initial lock-on and when the birds were flying towards me, but for the type of photography I was doing, just some more casual wildlife photography, I was happy with how this camera performed. And I do think that given more time with the camera, more time familiarizing myself with the various autofocus modes and when to best use them, along with some Nikon firmware updates that we're all hoping for, I think that this camera's autofocus capabilities are perfectly adequate for any high action and wildlife situations. With the firmware that this camera is running as of today, it does not seem like this camera is up to snuff with the D6s, the D850s, the R6s, the Sony A9s. But ask yourself, do you really need those autofocus capabilities? Or are they something that would just be a very nice bonus that if you were picking a new system, you would definitely consider? I shot a lot of video as well, handheld with the Tamron 100-400, and that lens does have built-in stabilization combined with the camera's IBIS. I'm not sure exactly how well the stabilization in the third-party lenses works with the FTZ adapter with the camera's IBIS, but just shooting handheld video, I got some results that I guess I'm happy with. They're very good quality. 4K out of this camera is absolutely beautiful, but I do think for my video work in the future, I will be bringing my tripod along with me. It's not really easy to get stabilized footage at 400mm, even with the combined stabilization of both the camera and the lens. Later on in the day, I got the opportunity to shoot this beautiful sandpiper here, and here's where the Z6ii's mirrorless capabilities really came in clutch for me. I was shooting along the shore in some very muddy, marsh-like conditions, and my shoes were absolutely caked with mud, as well as my pants at the end of the shoot. And I wouldn't have been comfortable taking my tripod and putting it down in the muck there, but I did not need to because I was literally able to hold the camera, not even up to my eye, but down below, basically on ground level, because this sandpiper was really small, and just using the live view autofocus, I was able to get some amazing shots from a perspective that I just would not have gotten with a DSLR. And after I got a lot of keeper shots that I was happy with, just using my normal autofocus methods of, using your single point, putting that over your subject and firing away, I decided to try out Nikon's new subject tracking. And for my initial tests of using this camera, this worked amazing with any still life subjects. I could put it on any object that's, over on my desk and just track it around and it would just stick onto my subject with no problems whatsoever. So I was interested to see how the subject tracking would work with a more complicated, busy wildlife situation here. And I'm actually kind of impressed with its performance. Now, it did not work flawlessly. There were lots of times where the box just completely went off and just started tracking random things that did not matter. But I got some good chunks of video where the subject box was over the sandpiper, was able to track it as it was moving closer and further away from me, side to side in all this marsh. And I think that did enable me to get some footage that I wouldn't have otherwise. And I guess that's kind of my thoughts on the Z6ii. It allows me to get shots, to get video footage that I would not have otherwise with my DSLR. I'm excited to get to know this camera better out in the fields because after years of shooting with my D750, my brain is kind of hardwired into pressing the, autofocus point right here or, scrolling this dial with this finger. And it's just not the same. It's a different camera, the Z6ii. As I become more comfortable with how to use this camera, my keeper rate will increase. But as someone who loves wildlife and doesn't want to sacrifice too much, after moving from my D750, I think this camera, it does all my wildlife needs. It records high quality 4K video, which is something I've been lusting after for a very long time. When I'm using just single point autofocus, it doesn't have a problem locking onto my subjects with my adapted lenses, and I'm able to get in focus, sharp shots, even in high action scenarios. For portraits, this camera kind of feels like cheating when I compare it to my D750. Going from moving autofocus point with my D-pad just over to the eye and, being in lots of situations where I can't and I have to recompose, to going to this new mirrorless system where I can just do a wide area box, put it over their face, click a button, and boom, locks right onto the eye. That's a complete game changer. I am so eager to go out and shoot some events, shoot some weddings, and be able to really test this out, because I think this will make my event and portrait work just so much easier, so much more streamlined, and give me a much higher keeper rate. So is this the camera that's best for action photography? No, I don't think so. I think for around this price point, you can get a camera like the D500, a used D850, an A7 III, an R6, that's a little bit more expensive, a used A9, and you will get a higher keeper rate when autofocus stills. But if you decide to go with the DSLR, you're going to be losing out on a lot of the video capabilities and a lot of the hybrid stuff that makes mirrorless cameras so appealing and is why I chose them. If you're a Nikon shooter and you want a camera that can kind of do it all, that can shoot portraits, that can shoot action, that can shoot videos, I think this is your best option if you are in the F or Z ecosystem. I'm very happy with my purchase. I am so excited to go out and shoot more wildlife video stuff, because that has been something I've been wanting to do ever since I, started watching nature documentaries. And stay tuned for some more Z6ii reviews. I do event work, I do portraits, I do weddings, I do sports photography, I do wildlife photography, I do a little bit of everything. So I will be publishing some much more in-depth reviews in those respective areas. So if you are looking for some Nikon Z6ii reviews, make sure you click that subscribe button. I post mainly wildlife photography videos right now, but this YouTube channel's young, and I'm wanting to make a variety of photography, video related stuff in the future. So yeah, if you enjoyed, leave a like, subscribe to the channel. And if you are looking to purchase a Z6ii and have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them in the comments below. So yeah, that'll be it for this little first impressions thing. And thank you so much for watching. Peace.